Welcome to Rich Conversations. Today we'll chat with Jason Knoespel. We talked about the coronavirus situation, especially here in Chicago, and he discussed his experience during this strange and unique time. I also had him reflect a little deeper on life by asking him some personal questions during the back half of our conversation. I really enjoyed the thoughtfulness and the depth to our conversation. I'm grateful to share it with you guys. So why don't we begin? All right. So we have Jason here. Jason, how are you doing during this coronavirus situation?
I can't, all things considered, I can't complain too much. I'm definitely, in a better position than a lot of people. It's easy to complain about having to be, kind of locked in. But, I think compared to what a lot of people are going through out there that may not, have a home to kind of to quarantine themselves in, or even be in a job that would allow for work from home. I think I'm in a pretty, I've been doing pretty well, and I think I've also been kind of preoccupied. I've been moving throughout this entire quarantine, so like the last 3 weeks
Okay.
have been definitely been a distraction. I've definitely been outside my home probably than Lori Lightfoot would prefer. Given all the emergency text we seem to get from her.
I get those
Um,
texts. She's been a little quiet on the text recently though, I feel like.
yeah, the last few days have been better. But there was there was a 24-hour period where I felt like we got three emergency texts. I don't know if it was from her or the state. I think there was a combination, but I got the one about basically shutting down the lakefront,
Yeah.
um, which it clearly was a big deal. I got the one then I think this one was from the state, but about the need for healthcare workers, which I can definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like I imagine that they're probably getting hit pretty hard or anticipating getting hit pretty hard, both from just general capacity in a normal situation, and then also
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of healthcare workers, they're kind of out there on the front lines being impacted the most by the virus in terms of even just catching it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, those. I had some movers helping me out last weekend, and they were joking they like half expect to see Lori Lightfoot driving up and down, Clark Street, yelling at people to get inside. Which generally I support her. I agree with
Yeah.
her. But I think I don't know. It's been interesting having been out and about more than probably the average person during the quarantine. There's definitely been more people out than I would have expected. Um, and I think honestly, shutting down the lakefront, like while I'm sure that a lot of thought went into it, it seems like it's kind of like funneled more runners onto the sidewalks, which
Yeah.
makes social distancing impossible. And I'm a runner myself, so like I'm not, I'm going to criticize runners, but like I feel like that's more dangerous because they're breathing heavily, they're probably spitting, like I feel like it's almost kind of had a backlash effect with how many runners are out there now. Although I do see a lot of them kind of running on the street more than, which is I think good, but it's an interesting kind of dilemma.
So I've gone
Um,
for a walk twice this week. So that which is more than what I've been like inside this entire time. And then I'm like cautiously
yeah,
stepping outside and I'm walking, I'm like, looking around, and then joggers will just like go right next to me. And I'm like, guys, come
yeah,
on.
out of nowhere. Yeah,
uh,
no, it's bad. But no, I mean, all things considered, considering this is probably like the biggest event of our generation
mhm.
up to this point, being called to sit on our couch as opposed to going to war, like people may have been
Yeah.
in World War II, I think
Yeah.
is, for all intents and purposes, is it could be a lot worse. Not to downplay what's happening at all,
Right.
but yeah, it's been very interesting to say the least. And I'm definitely now I'm kind of looking forward that the move's over with, planning on staying in just in case I have exposed myself to anything, being out and about more than the average person. I'm kind of making a point to stay in now for the next few weeks. to make sure I didn't become a carrier or don't affect anyone else if I am kind of an asymptomatic carrier.
Yeah. So how would you normally spend your time in Chicago?
So, I mean, I think generally, um, obviously, I mean, if you want to kind of go in different areas of life, I'm someone that, even though I have the ability to work from home, I technically prefer to work in the office. So I'm on the bus. I'm going downtown every weekday morning. I enjoy that aspect of that part of my routine.
Hmm.
In a normal situation, it gives me an opportunity to kind of read and to catch up on stuff that I want to actually spend time doing. So that's one area. Obviously, being in the office and seeing people on a regular basis, having face-to-face meetings with my client at work, all of that is what I would normally be doing from a professional standpoint. I think personally, like I'd be, obviously, I was training actually for a marathon in the 2 or 3 months leading up to March. So there's a lot of just running and being
Hmm.
out on the lakefront on the weekends. Training on the treadmill in the morning before work. That's kind of gone away. I haven't kept up my running as much, partly because I've been busier just with the move. And I think I had always kind of planned that at least like I was at least to keep myself in the shape I had kind of gotten to with the training. I was hoping to still run as much as possible, but I kind of have changed
Yeah.
perspective with like kind of my own experience just walking out and about. And if I were to run, I would definitely wear a mask just to prevent myself from spreading my germs.
They're saying now though, they're saying now that you should cover your mouth and your nose with whatever you can right now, right?
Yeah, yep, which is a complete about turn on what they were telling us a week ago,
Yeah.
which has been interesting. I think I don't know. It's interesting because yeah, like I'd say even as recent as a week ago, people were saying, oh, don't wear a mask, preserve the mask for the healthcare workers, which I totally get. And if that was the
Yeah.
premise that they were saying it under, I totally understand and I'm all about it. But yeah, it's definitely interesting the switch that's kind of happened, which I think it sounds like from everything I've read has to do with the fact that you can be asymptomatic for days before you
Yeah.
even know you have it. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I
Um,
see too that Lightfoot and the governor, they're preparing McCormick Place. I don't know if you've seen photos, but they have
yeah,
all these spots set up, and Chicago, I think, is anticipating a pretty intense few weeks coming up, and I think they're gearing
yeah,
up for or preparing for the worst, you know?
hmm yeah. Which I mean, I think it makes sense given everything we've seen out of New York.
Yeah,
It's pretty scary what they're going through.
yeah,
But yeah, no, I mean, I think what I would normally be doing, other than that, obviously hanging out with friends at night, being out and about, in my social life, like, I think that would be much more common than it has been. So yeah, it's definitely been a change of pace from my typical routine.
So what's your routine
Um,
like now?
well, it's been a pretty consistent loop of wake up, shower, you know, walk 20 feet down the hall to my desk to start working,
Okay.
um, finishing up there. And then, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's been a lot of like last week before the move. It was just getting on the 22 bus, taking it up Clark and coming over to the condo I moved into and just basically cleaning up and kind of casually moving stuff little by little each night.
Hmm.
And I mean, it was like, and then I would go home and literally just basically go to bed and wake up and do the same thing. It was basically that was the cycle for a good probably
Yeah.
14 to 20 days. So it's been a little bit different. And honestly, I'm kind of breaking the rules, the routine up to this point for the quarantine so far,
So were you
just because I've
ever
been out
nervous about
more than I
that?
probably should have
Like,
been.
were you nervous about going on the
Yeah,
22 and like were you wearing gloves and like what was your situation like?
I work. I mean, I wear gloves. I would also just basically first thing I would do anytime I got back was wash my hands, which I've
Wash your
never
hands.
been so neurotic
Yeah.
about washing my hands. I have different neuroses like about other things, but now it's definitely my hands are very dry because I wash them so often. Yeah, no, I was nervous, but I mean, frankly, like it was when I was out at night, which was usually around like 6 o'clock or nine to anywhere from like either 6 to 9. It was pretty dead. It seemed like it
Yeah.
was more active during the day. Like the few times I went out, like during work to go quickly go to the grocery store, there were more people out then.
Yeah.
But it's been kind of eerily. Like I remember one of the initial nights, like right after Pritzker announced the stay in place policy or shelter in place policy. Like literally, I was the only person walking home at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
The only vehicles on the street were the buses, and they were completely empty. And
Yeah.
just I remember being struck like, oh man, if like Pritzker would feel good about this because he finally like got what he wanted, as opposed to like the weekend before was St. Patrick's Day, and
Yeah.
going by bars, they were just overflowing. So I mean, yeah, it was
Yeah.
definitely eerie being out and
So
about at night.
what's something new that you're doing or feeling that surprised you? You mentioned the washing the hands neurotically, but are there other things too?
Yeah, I mean, the washing the hands seems like a cop out because I think that's a lot of people. Um, I mean, if I'm being honest, I feel less bad about just kind of chilling and doing nothing than I normally would.
Yeah. You're the
Uh,
type of person
that's new.
that always has to be doing something, I feel like.
Yeah. And or I would feel guilty, like there'd be kind of an underlying guilt that would be like that's the old neuroses.
Yeah.
Is like if I'm just sitting there doing nothing, I'm like, what could I be doing? Like
Yeah.
I'm wasting my time right now. Now we're kind of being told to do that, so that feeling,
Yeah.
that lack of FOMO is not really, it's not exactly FOMO, but the fear of not doing something that could be getting you ahead in whatever other goals you should be doing, which actually, that's a whole other conversation. But
Yeah.
I feel like I've been reading about like more famous philosophers or figures in history like Shakespeare and Isaac Newton, like kind of made their biggest discoveries
Sure.
during quarantines, during like historical plagues. Yeah. I think, but that feeling of like, now I kind of have an excuse not to do anything, which after maybe it's just because I'm like very just recently finished moving that I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to having it because I have been doing quite a bit. I'm looking forward to having an excuse not to do anything.
Yeah.
That's sort of new, I would say. What about yourself, Rich?
Um, Something I'm surprised about that I do.
Yeah, a feeling. Yeah.
Um, the biggest thing that surprised me is how much my sleep schedule is off. I've been getting
Really?
terrible sleep, terrible sleep. And I think it's because I haven't gone outside in like this week. So I noticed I've been getting such poor sleep. I've been kind of in my apartment for the last 3 weeks um and I've been getting really poor sleep. So I thought I should go outside more. And I've been not going outside because I don't want to get sick. So then I don't want to get sick and I spread it or I can't work. But I think it was affecting my sleep schedule too much. So I've been trying to like do more of that. So that surprised me.
Yeah.
I don't read as much as I used to, which is strange.
No, same. That's yeah. I had the same exact thing.
But I think the last few weeks has just been like adjusting to this period of time. And now I feel like people
Hmm.
now have found their routines within it. And so now my routine will pick up reading a little bit more. And I read a book in like 3 days, uh, Fahrenheit
Oh,
451
nice.
recently. So I
Okay.
have a stack of
Yep.
books. I just queued. I just got a queue. I was asking my friend Sammy right before like everything shut down. I'm like, should I go to the library and pick up some books? He's like, bro, everybody's touching those books and like, don't do that. And I'm like, and I figured I switched my thinking of I don't think you can really be a man if you haven't read the books in your own library, you know? So
Okay.
I've gotten a lot of books from estate sales recently. So I have stacks of
Okay.
books around my apartment. And the reason I have those books is because like they interested me. So why not read them before I go searching for more books to read, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
But
I've been having the same thing though. That's surprising to me. I'm generally a reader, and I've been reading a lot less the last few weeks. I think it's because like I kind of mentioned it in my normal routine. Like my reading time was typically reserved for like the commute, which is why actually enjoy a long commute.
yeah,
So like that previous routine is kind of throwing off my whole deal and ability to read a
yeah,
lot because like I had deliberately put all like dedicated that those two specific times that I know are going to happen every single day for the purposes of ensuring I read a lot
yeah,
that are now it's now gone. So I got to figure out a new routine. That part I haven't figured out yet.
yeah. What music have you been listening to most since
Honestly, I
this is all
haven't.
going on?
Yeah, I haven't been listening to a lot of music. I mean, so when I turned on music specifically, I've turned on Kendrick. I go to my kind of my staples,
Okay,
which Kendrick Lamar, basically his whole discography from Good Kid, Mad City to
that's
to
like
Pimp a
that's
Butterfly
your
to
thing, yeah.
Damn, yeah, Section 80. Yeah, I mean, if anything, I've turned on, I've gone through kind of Kanye's trilogy as well. His first three albums specifically, but then also, I think Yeezus for some reason seems to fit the moment. There's a darkness to
Oh
Yeezus that
yeah.
I think is very kind of fitting for the moment. So yeah, the little I have listened to music, it's been primarily podcasts, honestly, or Howard Stern is what I've primarily been listening to. But of the music I have listened to has been more of the staples, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's probably because that there's a semblance of comfort, something maybe subconsciously. Like I'm not really too anxious right now,
Okay.
but maybe subconsciously I'm like being drawn to like kind of the music I know I'm just gonna really appreciate.
I'm curious if other people are experiencing that same thing where they're retreating back to music that they know in their life at a certain point of their life, or they're exploring these years of their life and reflecting on that music. So I've been listening to, um, so I have a vinyl record collection, and I have a Spotify playlist. I have a Senate playlist where I pick two songs from each album, and it goes onto this playlist.
Hmm.
And then I have a House of Reps playlist, which is basically however many songs I like per record, I put it in there. So I've been listening to that one, the House of Reps playlist, quite a bit with my vinyl collection. And I realized that like every single I've been living in Chicago for over 10 years, that every single record is like it reminds me of my experience in Chicago. And
Yeah.
there's a story behind each vinyl record that I own, and I've listened to all these records. These records are consistent throughout my Chicago experience the last 6 years. So it's interesting to listen to these songs while I'm cooped up inside, and it makes me think of all my Chicago experiences, you know?
Yeah. Is it sort of putting you in those experiences like through the music?
Yeah, it helps me reflect and just be like grateful for those moments in life. And like being an older, wiser individual now, I can think back of like, oh yeah, I remember when I used to listen to the song, and this is what I was going through at that time. And wow, that's so interesting that I was doing that and thinking that, and
Yeah. Yeah. No, while we've been talking about this one, I think it's a different genre for sure, but Whitney, the Chicago band,
oh yeah,
they'd be very, it seems like for some reason I got an urge to listen to some of their music seems like it really fit the moment. It's kind of like melancholy,
yeah.
kind of low key. It'd be nice to listen to right about now.
Yeah, my friend Carlita, she's the violinist in the band.
Oh, is she really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, when they play
Wow.
in Chicago,
That's pretty cool.
she does the strings and stuff. Um,
Wow.
what are you most excited to experience again in the city?
Oh, I mean that's easy. I think it's being on the beach and on the lakefront.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's going to be a pretty common answer for a lot of Chicagoans. Also, I think the neighborhood I just moved to is a little bit closer to Wrigley, and I'm not a Cub fan at all. I'm looking forward to when baseball's back though, and I'm get that annoyed feeling walking up and down Clark Street of all the Cub fans. But just that, like, I'm kind of nostalgic for it right now.
I'm the
I'm
same
looking
way.
forward to when I hope it's coming back. I've heard rumors they're going to play baseball in empty stadiums in like Arizona and Florida,
Okay.
which would be a pretty big letdown. But at least we'd have some kind of you know baseball to watch. But
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to just those iconic Chicago moments of being on the lakefront. I'm really hoping we get to experience Chicago summer. I hope that's the light at the end of this tunnel. But obviously, I mean, we got to do what makes the most sense from an epidemiology standpoint, where if you don't want anything to come back if we try doing it
Yeah.
too soon.
I was just thinking about that before our call, how around this time you and I would probably be going to a Brewers Cubs game at Wrigley
Yep.
during
Yeah.
the day
Yeah.
and just being at Wrigley. It's a great stadium to be at in the springtime when the sun's out and
Yeah.
drinking a Goose Island beer or something, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Notoriously, I mean, underdressing, like looking out the window and seeing how nice it looks, and then getting there and feeling the wind hit you when you're in
Yeah.
the stadium. I feel like I do that every April at Wrigley. It's kind of
Yeah.
no, those are the things I'm looking forward to and hopeful that we still get to do.
What's one restaurant you'd love to go to right now and just eat at, dine in?
Trying to think of one that has a rooftop. Those are all mostly bars, though. I mean, really, just any rooftop bar in the city would be, it's kind of what I've been craving the last week or two. The ability to just be outside.
Yeah.
I wish I could think of a specific. Pequod's is definitely more of a winter experience, but I mean, just
Yeah.
that Chicago feeling of being indoors,
Yeah.
I would give. It's a very quintessential feeling. Crisp, I think is a good example of just like how overcrowded that place always is when you try eating there,
Yeah.
with the stools or the benches that they have for people. That's like true communal dining. I mean, I think that kind of encapsulates the type of thing we really like. It's the exact opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. You can still obviously order out from there, but there's nothing that kind of matches the experience of having them deliver those, the wings fresh out of the oven,
Yeah.
and that communal experience. There's a certain vibe at Crisp,
Yeah.
um, that you get that just is completely unique to compared to any other Chicago restaurant.
So we're gonna switch it up a little bit. We're gonna do a little bit more reflecting on life. So I want you
Yeah.
to
Okay.
describe.
Do it.
I'd like you to describe the best day of your life.
So, I mean, I would have to say it's probably April 20th, 2012, which was the first Demonthon.
Okay.
And, I think it was kind of a whirlwind. It's interesting you asked for the best day because Demonthon is a 24-hour dance marathon where, DePaul students fundraise $250 to attend this event where you cannot sit for 24 hours straight. And all the money and proceeds went to Lurie Children's Hospital. For me, being a part of the group that helped start it, it was a very popular concept across colleges across the country. And so bringing it to DePaul and kind of like having this model that we were expected to follow, like there was a lot of expectations that we had placed on ourselves, granted, and but also just like generally it was this new thing, this new concept that no one was really familiar with, or like, I mean, you hear it described where you're literally asking people to give you at least $250 from a fundraising standpoint so you can go stand for 24
4
hours. It just
hours.
sounds
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah. But for me, I think like being a part of the group that put it on, we were literally there. It was a Friday 5 p.m. to Saturday 5 p.m. event. We were there probably that Friday by about 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. to help set everything up. So it was, it was not just 24 hours, closer to like 34 hours,
Right.
but just the anticipation from when you're getting there and you're seeing this empty gym at McGrath
Mhm.
Arena and everyone, all these people that you've got, you've had both good and bad times with from just like, that are natural to any large organization in terms of, like potential, like, in situations of high stress, people are going to be on edge a little bit more than they normally would. So you have your natural kind of conflicts that are going to happen when you put together an event like that, and to see it all culminate, across those 30 hours from like setting the event up to, not knowing whether or not the dancers were going to show up. The dancers are the students that raised the $250, whether they would actually show up for what they raised money for,
Yeah.
to seeing them come through and to kind of like to basically then have to go through the event and basically run and put on this 24 hours of activities so that people are distracted from how much pain they're in for standing 24 hours,
Yeah.
to getting to meet and listen to the stories of the different families. We had a family come that was getting treated or had been treated at Lurie Children's, or what used to be Children's Memorial Hospital, come through every hour, tell their story and share their story, a lot of which were very, very emotional, but also very inspiring to seeing the kids. There are a lot of them are younger kids still that are getting treatments, getting to interact with college kids,
Which
which
is
to
like a
them is like the
cool thing for
coolest thing
them.
ever.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like those little kids, it's got to be amazing. And for the college kids, it was a great distraction from what they were doing, in terms of the pain they may be in, all the way up to the final hour and a half, where it's just basically one giant dance party.
Yeah.
Everyone's delirious, and no one up to this point knows how much money was raised. To finding out, we raised over $100,000 in the first event, which
Yeah.
which broke the record nationally for a first year dance marathon. It's since been broken, which is a great thing for Children's Miracle
Right.
Network, the nonprofit it raises money for. I mean, that day, just beginning to end, it was such a whirlwind of emotions, and to see it kind of, it still exists today, but nothing's going to kind of replace that day, the feeling that you kind of got, going through all of that. And it really kind of brought together a sense of community, both within DePaul and then also with Chicago as well.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely probably up to this point the best day. I don't have any kids. I haven't gotten married, so.
What's your favorite travel experience?
So you were actually on this travel experience.
Hey.
Yeah. Going to Southeast Asia was very cool, just because, I've been a lot of cool places. Well, I mean, yeah, so I've traveled to other places too that are just as exciting and were just as fun. But I think the unique part of going to Southeast Asia on the trip we went on was it was definitely the most different. There was definitely a dichotomy between like what it feels like to be in Chicago versus what it feels like to be in Hanoi, Vietnam. It's kind of just, it's otherworldly from, walking down the streets and having to kind of muster the courage to cross the street because there's no stop signs.
Those
You just basically,
mopeds are just zooming by. Yeah.
yeah, you have to trust that people are going to stop when you cross, which is like, it's honestly kind of traumatic initially,
Yeah.
but it was also very just completely different experience than anything I've ever done. Vietnam, especially. I know we also went to Hong Kong. We also went to Thailand. But yeah, Hanoi was just a completely different experience. It still felt like, I mean, in some ways, like it seems like they were, there. It's definitely seemed underdeveloped, but at the same time, the people there they were so kind and respectful and so nice. Like everyone just there seemed to be a feeling of cheerfulness, that coming from the West and especially like a developed country, you wouldn't necessarily expect. If you saw pictures, you'd feel bad, but the people seemed very happy and very kind of at peace with who, like, both with visitors, outsiders coming in, especially with outsiders coming in, and all the history that has happened between Vietnam and the U.S. You would expect there to be some kind of edge there, but there
Yeah.
definitely wasn't anything of the
I don't
sort,
know.
and in fact, the complete opposite.
I don't know how you feel, but I feel like Hanoi was the place, possibly the most memorable, but the most unique scents I ever smelled. And every
Yeah.
now and then I'll
Yep.
like catch a whiff of something somewhere randomly and I'll be like, it just brings me right back to Hanoi.
Yep. Yeah, it was
Like
so unique. I mean, I think
so
that's,
unique. Yeah.
yeah, walking off the plane. I think we like walked off. I think we had to do a connecting flight or something because we had to actually walk outside off the plane, right?
Yeah, like the Beatles, like
If I remember.
where
Yeah.
like you have a I've never had it where you have a plane and then granted I haven't like flown a lot, but like to a place where you don't pull up to the like terminal. There's just like a stairs that they wheel out and then you just walk down it. And that was different because it was like kind of rainy and then we would
Yep.
take like a taxi to our place and you're on the highway and everybody's just going in and out. People are on like motorbikes with their kids just like on the back and they're just like
Yep.
cruising and it's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was insane. I mean, you're hit like, yeah, you're hit like the humidity too. It's, I think, definitely added the smell. You kind of like you're getting off in the jungle in a way. I mean, not really. It's obviously developed and whatnot, but you can tell you're not that far from true
Mhm.
jungle experience.
What was another favorite thing on that trip?
I mean, I think Phuket. Oh, I mean, yeah, no. So Phuket was amazing, and we weren't there long enough for my own preference because it
Mhm.
was basically just a beach, an island full of beaches, and huts. The hut that we stayed in, and walking. I can remember, obviously during the day it was great being on the beach because you're literally just hanging out there, wave jumping in the ocean. That was an amazing experience.
I was thinking about our trip the other day. So I had been bunkered down in my apartment. I hadn't gone outside in 2 weeks. And so the first time I went outside for a walk, it was almost like it was a new city to me. All the buildings were very distinctive. All the architecture, it was almost like it was screaming
Hmm.
in my face. And it's almost like I looked at it like being in the city for the first time. Like I'm walking around my neighborhood and just like the architecture is so unique and it made me think of like wow, this is like an impression, a fresh impression of what Chicago is. And we went on
Yeah.
our trip to like all those different cities, Hong Kong, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, Bangkok, and Phuket, and we just get a quick impression of each place. And here it's almost like a fresh impression of Chicago. And I walk under the L and I'm thinking like, oh my goodness, like this is so large. This is such like a industrial feat to have. I'm at the Irving Park Brown Line stop and just like looking up and these steel beams and the colors, the like manila and the brown and um, everything was very striking to me and refreshing. And it's almost like being excited to be living here all over again.
Yeah. No, that's going to be interesting. Like, I'm excited now that I'm like staying in and actually have been kind of isolated for a few days. I'm excited for that feeling. It's going to be like a completely fresh new perspective of the city,
Yeah.
which is going to be cool.
What's your most memorable scent in your life?
I feel like I was having a hard time. I think honestly, we touched upon it about 5 minutes ago I think anytime, so definitely going to Vietnam, there was a very unique scent that was distinctive from everything I've smelled before. But I think anytime you go to, like, if you have the ability to travel, anytime you go somewhere new, there's a new smell. Or the smell is the first thing you associate with that place.
Yeah.
But I think we kind of, this one I was having a hard time thinking of like, what could it be? And I think if it probably is that first feeling walking off the plane in Vietnam.
Yeah, I would say like
There was a very
walking down the
unique smell.
streets and you have this combination, this like locked in scent of all the fresh street food and the fruit and the smog from the motorbikes and then the humidity and the
Yeah,
jungle and it's just like all together. It's like I've never smelled this before.
yeah. And then for like a month or 2 months after, I was smelling it everywhere, like on all the clothes I brought. It was, and then you definitely notice it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that would be it.
Do you have a memorable sound in your life?
So I think growing up playing baseball, I think it's very easy to associate probably any sport, honestly, but like for me, it was baseball. There's very unique sounds, whether it's the hitting of the ball during like taking ground balls before the game, playing catch, to the music. Like when I played baseball, I think they had the same CD playing over and over and over again. Now, anytime I hear, a lot of it's the Beatles too. She loves me, yeah, yeah. Like it was like the same. Anytime I hear a song now, I'm immediately brought back to being in the field,
Yeah.
like warming up before the inning started. Yeah, I think like sounds, especially with the game of baseball, I think it's probably partly because it does move kind of slow.
Hmm.
You have more time to sort of be mindful of all the things that are going on around you,
Yeah.
um, from a sensory standpoint. And I mean, that's another smell too, honestly. Being on the field and like the smell of like fresh cut grass. But definitely just growing up playing baseball, I think that's what I would probably associate. A lot of unique sounds that I don't hear anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's kind of nostalgic too, I think. That brings me back to that.
What's the most influential book you've ever read?
So there's a lot of like kind of candidates here. There's a really good novel called How to Get Rich in Asia. I'm not even getting the title right, but it's a novel that was just a really well written story, and like that, I don't know why it's my favorite piece of fiction that I've read over the last few years. That was one candidate. There's a book that's nonfiction, Principles by Ray Dalio, which I just really appreciate the process that Ray Dalio who started. He's a hedge fund guy who started Bridgewater Associates, which is the largest hedge fund in the world. Just the constant self reflection that he was doing
Okay.
throughout life, to where he basically it kind of all culminated in this book. Now that he's probably in his 70s, and it's a very the book is very nicely put together, and it's kind of sectioned out in a way that you could tell there was a lot of thought, and you could tell it is something that's truly an evolution across decades.
Hmm.
That would have been another candidate, but I honestly think the one I settled on and that's influential in the fact that it actually changed or definitely had an influence on my trajectory was reading Moneyball in seventh grade, which Moneyball is a book by Michael Lewis, who's a prolific author. But it was focused on baseball, the Oakland A's, and this new strategy that they were using called using sabermetrics is what it was called, but basically using like data and statistics as opposed to like the traditional way of finding talent via scouting and using
Yeah.
your human eyes. So Moneyball, like the reason it was called Moneyball is because the A's were kind of a smaller market than your typical Major League Baseball franchise, and so they had to get creative in ways to win. And so they basically hired a bunch of people that are into statistics to like find like basically hidden anomalies in statistics,
Yeah.
to find cheap talent that's still going to achieve the same result that you might not see with your two eyes, or that a
Yeah.
scout that's been doing it for 30 years might not see in front of them. And at the time, my dream was to be a general manager of a baseball team, which is why I read it. But looking back on it now, you can kind of connect the dots from where I'm at now, which is healthcare analytics, and kind of draw back to like how I ended up, being interested in healthcare was because I studied economics in college and was
Hmm.
really interested in policy and doing something that, where you try to do good for the greater population, to
Hmm.
which, I was interested in economics, probably because, initially it was law, but economics was kind of there was less of a barrier from a financial standpoint to
To
get
get
there,
into.
to like, yeah, to drawing it back to like, here, this book I read when I was in seventh grade was all about data and statistics and using, data to, find insights to help kind of like decision making, which is, something that now is something I do every day. And it's just interesting to kind of look back on it and like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have, I didn't know it at the time, but it's what I think kind of triggered me onto this path of ending up where I did, which I don't know how you draw being wanting to be a baseball GM to being in healthcare analytics, but like somehow it happened all because of, I would kind of point to this book as the first
Yeah.
place where it really kind of the seed was planted.
Wow. What about, is there a movie or a film that's done that for you or?
So so it's not a movie. I'm not as big of a movie person as I am a television person, but around the same time, maybe a year later, I watched the last season of The West Wing, which was airing at the time, um, and kind of following it in light of the 2004 presidential election. And it's
Okay.
really what I think drew an interest into politics. And I ultimately ended up going back and rewatching the entire like 8 seasons worth of West Wing. And it's definitely what kind of spawned my interest in policy and politics. I was always sort of naturally interested in history, but
Mhm.
nothing in a way that like was tied to current events.
Okay.
In the way that I think West Wing has probably been very influential just in terms of what my current interests are and like the types of things I'm interested in following.
Yeah. What's something about you that few people know or
Hmm.
understand?
Yeah, this one is tough. Yeah, I don't know. This one is I don't think, I mean, all my closest friends know, but like I don't know if I wouldn't, it's not something I really advertise a lot. But just my kind of, you know, obsessive interest in like won't miss a show, Howard Stern, of Howard Stern.
Okay.
I think he's kind of got this association as like just the average person is aware of his kind of like shock jock mentality and like how kind of obnoxious and appropriate and inappropriate as he was during the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
And his fights with the FCC and just doing like really outlandish stuff. I think a lot of people that think they know me really well would be surprised to hear I listen to him with such a dedication that I do. But I don't know. It doesn't feel like it really. One, like a lot of the people that are closest to me and that I see on a week to week basis, most of them know this. But two, like I don't know. It seems like so kind of inconsequential, like a show I listen to. But at the same time, like it's kind of
That's
like in today's culture, I think a lot of people like would be like it's easy to be offended, kind of like the by certain things that people say where or listen to, like where there's a judgment placed on like the type of content that you're
yeah.
choosing to associate yourself with. I think there is kind of something to it, which is why I think that's what I would think I would say. He's kind of somebody that's all about, like I think he's definitely misunderstood, but I think he sort of was open to that and was deliberately tried to be misunderstood for a long time. Now he's
Yeah.
definitely more self-reflective and has gone on more of a trying, I think, go mainstream is a lot of what is like diehard like fans that have been with him for decades would say. But there's just a level of self-awareness there that you don't hear really in any other kind of personality that's out there as much as he is,
Yeah.
that I really appreciate and that I now try to attribute to my life as well. He's very much into psychoanalysis, which I find interesting. I think he's just his perspective is very fresh and not something that's very unique. So yeah, I think that's what I would probably go with.
What's been a difficult moment in your life and how did you overcome it?
So I think probably when I found out I had melanoma, just over 5 years ago now, which I was lucky enough that it wasn't a huge. It was able to get surgically removed. It didn't spread in any way. I didn't have to do chemo or radiation or any of that. So I was fortunate in that sense, but it was definitely eye opening for the month or 2 months from the moment I found out. I actually found out on my birthday.
Oh,
Like I
man.
got the call from the doctor, which was like a month after I had had the biopsy done.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely one of the more interesting birthday experiences I've had. I think it was probably my 23rd birthday, I think. I can't remember if it was 24th. No, it was 2015. So it would have been 24th birthday. So yeah, I mean, those 2 months from when I found out to when I had the surgery done to the recovery were definitely all kind of eye opening and sort of it makes you think like, oh, like it forces you to reflect on everything you've been doing and like what you want to like what you it forces you to kind of think about like what you wish you could be doing when you're physically, incapacitated for a certain period of time. And
Yeah.
it's actually ultimately what led me to really get interested. Like I actually had signed up for a race. I wasn't really ever a runner, even through college. Like in high school, most of the sports I did was like baseball, basketball, and football. I didn't really start running until after college, and it was basically just something to do or like something else to kind of put my mind toward outside of work.
Hmm.
And I had signed up for my first race around the same time, and so I still did that first race, but kind of it was sort of a confluence of events in the sense that like it made me realize that like running is something that now if I was ever to like lose physical capabilities, it's probably the thing I would miss the most. And
Okay.
so it kind of led to it made running into more of a hobby and a thing I did more than I think it would have been if it hadn't happened around the same time. Yeah, I would say like I think those like I mean those types of moments they it's kind of like just this like more macro environment we're currently in, but like definitely on a micro level, those types of moments that force someone to kind of really take a look at their life and decide what's most important to them, and what
Yeah.
they want to spend their time doing.
I feel like I thought about that when you mentioned it makes you think about what you would do with your life if you're physically limited. And in a sense, we're all pretty physically limited right now in that we're supposed to stay at home and we can't, go out and do the things we used to. And it's kind of forcing us to reflect more on our lives and ask questions about ourselves.
Yeah.
After this pandemic situation passes, we don't know how long that's going to be. We hope for a short time. But what's a positive result you imagine could emerge?
So I'm going to give a macro and a micro answer to that. On a macro level, I hope it forces governments and institutions to take seriously the threat that the likelihood of a pandemic kind of presents to humanity.
Hmm.
I hope it kind of spurs more global collaboration among countries that otherwise maybe wouldn't be as closely aligned from a value standpoint. I hope that it kind of spurs investment into necessary resources and equipment that is necessary to fight a pandemic.
Hmm.
Um, I think all those things. It's interesting when you look at South Korea, Taiwan, China to a lesser extent, but still, I mean, like these countries where they've kind of gotten through the first phase, it seems like, and they're
Hmm.
sort of going back to normal life. All of them went through the first SARS pandemic or epidemic back in the early 2000s, and it's interesting that like it seems like all those countries that were impacted by that first SARS were
More prepared.
they kind of yeah they're more prepared this time around, and it's why I think they've kind of gotten through it quicker than the other countries that haven't had this experience. And so I hope that like from a national standpoint for the U.S. specifically, I hope we're more prepared and there's like there's more seriousness put into what we can do to prevent situations like this from occurring, because it's going to happen again.
Hmm.
I think everyone generally, it seems like pandemics and just like viruses from at the bacterial level are more likely in today's world. And I think,
Hmm.
I read an article a couple of weeks ago from Bill Gates, or it was an interview. It was an article in Vox with Bill Gates in 2015. And they asked him, you're doing all this work in development. What's the thing that scares you the most for humanity?
Hmm.
And he said, would be he said it's a flu-like pandemic is what scares him the most. And it was like very eerie reading back on it, because he basically talked about the Spanish flu specifically, which a lot of people, everyone's comparing this to now.
Hmm.
But he talked about how, he ran the Spanish flu through models, like through today's models, like what would happen if it happened in today's world. And given the mobility that people have nowadays that didn't
Yeah.
exist back then, it would just be almost impossible to contain. In the number of millions of people he said that his models projected would die as a result, is very scary. I mean, he said in the 30s of millions,
Okay.
which sounds insane. I think that also is kind of assuming that no intervention was done. So I don't doesn't seem like we're going to hit that point here, but I think the point is, there's definitely can be investment put into infrastructure to kind of make dealing with these types of
Yeah.
things easier down the road.
Yeah.
So that's a macro level and a hope for me. Micro level, I think, I hope it forces people to kind of not take for granted just, the ability to walk outside the simple things in life. And
Hmm.
this seems kind of cliche, but at the same time, it's true. Like, I think
It's
there's
what we're
certain things now
experiencing
you
right
kind of
now.
miss.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's a certain simplicity that you miss in our current situation that,
Yeah.
it's hard to appreciate it in the moment when it's happening every day, and it kind of gets just kind of ground into the daily experience. That it'd be nice to come out of this as a human race a little bit more mindful of the things that we usually would take for granted, from being able to give a family member a hug, to getting to go and see friends whenever you feel like seeing them, to taking a subway ride. Obviously that's a very urban centric point of view, but I think those smaller things that we can kind of do in our everyday life that seem sort of run of the mill in a normal situation, hopefully people are a little bit more mindful going forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, those are the questions I have. Thanks for being a good sport.
Yeah. Thanks, Rich.
Uh,
This is fun.
appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for listening to Rich Conversations. Be safe and wash your hands.